I would like to introduce everyone to Tabla Paul and to Kailash Ray. They both were in India in the 60s, and they both studied classical Indian music with some of the most amazing masters of classical Indian music of this century, and they have quite a few wonderful stories to tell about their interest in music and how that evolved in their education in this style of music. So, Paul, can you tell us how you got interested in Indian music and how you first came to have a teacher of Indian music?
Well, it's a long story, certainly, but we have to start somewhere. So I would say the beginning probably was in Nepal in '68 or something. I was interested in tabla, and my landlord, who was Tara Beer Singh from the Flower Garden building, introduced me to Professor Kali Prasad Sharma, who was the court musician of the king, Mahendra. He was the court tabla player. So when Mahendra had guests, to entertain them, he would have Kali Prasad come out and play for them. And so he introduced me, and Kali Prasad was a wonderful, very kind man. He lived in Patan, and I'd go out there for lessons. And I remember every Saturday, he would invite all his friends to come. The jaltarang player, the sitar player, the flute player, and they'd all come to his house, and his wife would make bong for everyone. And so that would be the kind of weekend event, you know. But I studied with him for about, let's say, a year and a half, something like that. And then I got sick in Nepal. I got something, and no one knew what it was in those days, and I even saw the royal doctor or something, and he said, "Oh, you have cholera or something." Of course I had hepatitis, but they didn't seem to know. So I flew down to Calcutta, and I remember wearing dark glasses because my eyes had started to turn yellow, and I didn't want them to say, you know, you can't be on the plane or something. And I recovered in Calcutta. After a couple of weeks, I met John Watkins, who was a very good doctor there. And once I recovered, I wanted to continue studying tabla. So after inquiring, I knew Uday Shankar, who was Ravi Shankar's brother. He was a famous dancer. And his tabla, his master drummer was someone called Kailash Ray. And I would say he was my next teacher. And he was wonderful. He took me to Kalighat. I bought my first pair of tablas, because in Nepal they didn't have very good tablas. So this was like my real introduction to really formal North Indian classical music was in Calcutta. So he bought me a great tabla, and he started teaching me, and I already knew a little bit. And then he said, "Oh, there's such great tabla players here, and you should, you know, meet some of them." So he gave me the names of Mahapurush Mishra and Gyan Prakash Ghosh and Karamat Khan. And at that time there was a friend called Steve Landsberg who was studying with Mustaq Ali Khan. And he asked Mustaq Ali Khan for me, who should Paul study with out of all these, you know, who's the best? Who should he go to? And Mustaq Ali Khan, without any hesitation, said, "Go to Karamat. He's the one. He has the goods, you know." So I went and actually visited all of them. I visited Mahapurush Mishra, and he was a little standoffish. He kept, you know, I must have looked like kind of a, you know, just a street urchin or something. And he said, "Do you know what a commitment it is to learn tabla? This is like a major commitment. Are you prepared for this kind of, you know, training and everything?" And so I was a little intimidated by him, somewhat. And then Gyan Ghosh was away from Calcutta. He wasn't around. So I went to see Karamat Khan, who was living in Ripon Lane, Calcutta, which is an Anglo-Indian neighborhood. And when I went to meet him, and it was in his house, his family was there, it was very informal, the daughters were like gorgeous, you know. And he said, yeah, no problem, come, just come. And I said, well, where, to the school? He said, no, you come to my house. You know? So I arranged with him 2 lessons a week. I think it was a Monday and maybe a Wednesday, or Monday and a Thursday, something like that. And I remember it cost the equivalent of about $12 per class, something like that. It's like very reasonable. Or $12 a week for 2 classes, actually, which I paid him in rupees. And so I started studying with him, and he was a wonderful teacher. I remember the first bowl he gave me, which is in his style, it's called Farakabad, and it was a chalan, which is like a double-length qaida. So he gave me Gena Dagena Dete Gena Dage Tuna Gata Dete Gena Dage Dete Gena Dage Tuna Gata Tuna Dete Gena Dete Gena Tuna Gata Dete Gena Dage Dete Gena Dage Tuna Gata Gena Dagena Dete Gena Dage Tuna Gata Dete Gena Dage Dete Gena Dage Tuna Gata Tuna Dete Gena Dete Gena Tuna Gata Dete Gena Dage Dete Gena Dage Dete Gena Dage. So that was the first composition. It's a 2-finger tete. It's a Delhi style, but it's incorporated into the Farakabad repertoire. So I studied for 5 years. I stayed, and that was 1970, and I stayed till 75. I went to 2 lessons a week, come hell or high water. And I lived in Gariahat in Bandel Road, or an area called Baliganj. And I used to take the tram, the trolley car, to my lesson to Ripon Lane. And I remember one time on my way to my class, because I walked from the trolley to his house, which was on the outside looks very, very funky, you know, and big steel kind of tin gate and all this, and dogs barking. It's a really kind of rough, scroungy area. And one day I was walking to my class, I had my jola over my shoulder, and a weird Anglo-Indian guy comes up to me, and he sticks an air gun in my ribs, and he says, give me your money, you know, it's just like a pirate movie or something. He tries to hold me up, like this is in the, 9 in the morning. And the people sitting in the shops are sort of watching this, because that's what they do all day long, is just watch life go by. And they said, oh, no, leave him alone. He's a student of Karamat's. He's going for his lesson, because they all know my business better than I know it, you know. And they said, no, don't bother him. He's, like, protected, you know. He's a student of Karamat. And so the guy kind of sticks the thing back in his trousers and goes, like, sorry, kind of walks away, like, foiled again, you know. Yeah. But that was one incident, to give you an idea of the neighborhood. And he would teach me on his bed. You know, he had a large, even bigger than a king size.
Charpoy.
Huge. And everything happened on that bed. They slept there. He had his breakfast there. He shaved there. You know, towels were put down. Yeah. They conceived their kids there. They had their tabla lessons there. Everything happened. And I remember he had a couple of steel trunks under the bed. And it's like there was nothing decorated in the house. Like they were ready to leave within, 20 minutes notice, And when you go to a Bengali house, there's all kind of chachkas and very elaborate, decorative things. But he wasn't that way. Very simple man. And he smoked a little bit cigarettes. And he had a little funny little car he would drive every day to the radio station because he was a staff artist. A-class artist at All India Radio. So he had a lot to do with programming and things. And he also played a lot on the radio. So I was able to take a lesson and then go home, and chances were pretty good that I'd be hearing him that evening on the radio, playing with either a singer or instrumentalist or flute or violin. So it wasn't just getting lessons, it was being given the whole application of what you're supposed to, what the music is supposed to be, how it's supposed to, you know, be presented and all these in different capacities. I think the only thing he didn't really play much with was dance, because he was better known as an accompanist. And so it went on like that for 5 years. And I remember one other incident. I was sitting in the morning having my class, and Kermit had his back to the front door, and I was kind of facing the front door and where I was sitting. And you know, they have a big spittoon under the bed, which, because they eat pan all day long, betel nut, they have their pandan, the silver box, you know, and I gave him one for his birthday or something. It's German silver, you know, it's not real silver. But it has all the little compartments where you keep the cardamom and the cloves and the tuna and all these things. And there's always a big spittoon under the bed, and so every once in a while they pull it out, go, you know, spit the juice and back under the bed. So I was sitting there having my lesson, and all of a sudden this Anglo-Indian woman, young girl, rushes in screaming from the street and grabs the legs of Keramit's wife, who immediately comes out of the back room to see what's going on, what's disturbing in her house, you know. And that woman grabs her knees and says, please, please, you're a powerful lady, like, save me, and trying to figure out what's going on. Keramit doesn't even turn around to look, you know. And suddenly behind her come about 3 guys with big, like, machetes, you know, and they say she stole something and we're going to cut off her hands. And she's absolutely, completely terrified for her life. This is in the middle of my lesson. And Keramit's wife, just to give you an idea, she ignores the whole problem and she says, how dare you come into my house? And immediately starts to scold these guys, nothing to do with their issue. Yeah. How do you, first of all, you come into my house without being invited, like, this is unacceptable. She just scolds the lungis off of them. And they're forced to retreat because they are clearly in the wrong. Meanwhile, she's protected this young woman who's still literally clutching her knees. She can't even walk. You know? And so they finally, after about 5 or 10 minutes, they calm down enough to realize that they've made a social faux pas, you know, and they leave, and the young Anglo-Indian girl stays there for a while until it's safe to go. So she saved her life, or saved her hands, there's no doubt. During the whole thing, Keramit doesn't even turn around. When they came in, when I saw them, I jumped up, thinking they're robbing the house, because I didn't speak Bengali at that time. And I jumped up and I thought, I'm going to protect my guru, you know, with my life. So I'm standing there in like a sort of a kung fu posture on the bed, you know, ready to strike. Totally ineffectual, I'm sure. But I'm ready, you know, and he doesn't even react to this is just, I guess, normal Ripon Lane thing. He doesn't react at all, and then I see that the wife is taking care, and I sit down, mind my own business, like I should have done in the beginning. But anyways, at that moment, there was a Bengali student who was sitting there waiting for his class, his lesson after me, and he got so terrified of this whole encounter that the moment after they left, he didn't even wait for his lesson. He ran out the door and ran all the way home, crying, piggy, wiggy, wiggy, you know. He ran all the way home, and Keramit told me he never came back. It was like terrifying. It was like too dangerous to take a tabla lesson, you know. So Keramit thought I was cool. You know, he said, I'm going to teach you differently than the Bengalis. And he said, I don't know, maybe because I was a Christian, or I mean, I have no idea what, I mean, I wasn't, but there was something he felt that I was different, like I could keep a secret or something. And so he said, the bowls that I give you, don't, because the other students are going to ask him, what did he give you? He said, don't give them. Actually, he told me that after I had given one of the students a bowl. Yeah. And he said, what happens is, if it's like, you know, cats on a fence. If you tell one of them, then if one cat jumps, they're all going to jump. So if you tell one guy, he's going to immediately go and tell all of his friends, oh, I got this thing from Keramit. And immediately, instead of practicing and learning that bowl, it just becomes a source of his own ego, inflating his ego that he got some great composition. So he said, don't tell them, don't give them the material that I give you. And another incident I think is significant in terms of the whole Indian music learning experience is after about 3 years or so, I kind of plateaued out, you know. I had all this material that a lot of it I couldn't play, some of it I could sort of play, but I was sort of plateaued out. I needed, I guess my own practice was weak, I would say probably is the reason for it. And Kermit started to give me less and less kind of interesting things, you could say, if that's possible. And he had a student, his most devoted students was someone called Deepak Sengupta, who was an absolutely wonderful young Bengali man. He worked all day. He would come to Kermit's house before he started his job and see if Kermit needed him to do anything for him. And then if that was not, then he'd go and he'd work all day. Then he'd come after work and see if Kermit needed help with anything. And then if he didn't, he would go back home and he'd practice. And he was a wonderful, wonderful person. And he liked me. We became friends. So at one point he said to me, Paul, what's happening? How's your practice going? How are the lessons going? And I said, you know, I'm losing interest. So he said, okay, I'm going to talk to Kermit. I thought, oh my God, I don't want to get in trouble or something. And so he went and he spoke to Kermit. And he said, what are you giving this guy? You're just giving him all this kind of bowls that are in the public domain. Because Deepak they were very frank together. I saw that. So my next lesson, I went and Kermit kind of looked at me and he said, all right, he said, you're never going to be a full representative of our Gharana, of our style. In other words, they're not going to say, oh, Farrukhabad Gharana, listen to Paul or something like that. Maybe he realized where my career would sort of plateau out or something. He said, but I'm going to give you the keys to tabla. He said, I'm going to teach you how to play so that you're completely free in your playing. You can basically compose your own music. And he said, you know, you may not be a lineage holder, but you're going to be a free, I'm going to help you sort of free your musical style. So from then on, he started teaching this very far out stuff, which I later realized that's what he plays. When he's, you know, that's what he's accompanying. These are not lessons. This is the cool stuff, you know, that you can improvise a lot around. It's very free. It's not like a long pre-composed thing. It's a very fluid way, which you need for accompaniment. So he started to teach all these things like tit da da, like tit da 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 ding da da, get a da ding da tit da 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 ding da da, get a da ding da. These kind of bows, they're called luggy, and very beautiful, and Farrukhabad is famous for these. So from then on, he started to teach me some, as we would say in Hindi, khas cheese, good stuff, you know, the khas cheese. Not the other kind of cheese. Not the gorgonzola. But anyways, I have nothing but respect and admiration and hopefully appreciation for the kindness of all of the teachers that I had. That maybe I'm not the greatest student or greatest musician, but they certainly taught in a way that was ever patient, always trying to give me something that would challenge and make me grow more, and just kindness as people, you know, just on an ordinary level. They weren't haughty or anything like that. Anyways, that's a rough beginning of my years in Calcutta.
Thank you.